Alright guys, so Nick, Andrew, and I went out on the three bikes, the Nightster, the Iron 883, and the Iron 1200. Took them out, did some switching, and so we all kind of got to ride the bikes. And so I'll start off with number one, engine and performance. So on this bike you have the Evolution engine, air-cooled engine. It's something that you'd really expect from a Harley as far as the mannerisms and the characteristics of it. This engine definitely has the heart and soul of a Harley-Davidson, which I'll get more to in the future in a few minutes in this video. But going off of performance to start off with, the 883, it's one of the lowest performing engines within the Harley-Davidson lineup. That being said, with the weight and the type of the bike it is, I don't feel like it takes away from what most people want out of this motorcycle, and that is, a cruiser at a sub $10,000 price point that really looks like a bobber and really feels like a quintessential, stereotypical Harley-Davidson.
When the Iron 1200 was introduced, I thought it was a perfect Sportster for the lineup. Coming from, the Iron 883, there's a lot of people that love the Iron because it is a lower CC bike. It's basically kind of like the entry bike. A lot of people like them because they're blacked out. They have that cool feature. But a lot of people do the 1200 kits on them and they wish they had more out of them. So Harley came out with the Iron 1200.
As far as the engine performance goes, it's 83cc Harley-Davidson Evolution engine, and so it's not a very fast bike. Where you really feel that the most is out on the highway when you're rolling on the throttle, you're trying to pass people out on the freeway. You don't have a lot of that top end power. So from stoplight to stoplight, at surface street speeds, it's very adequate. Most people won't ever feel like the bike is underpowered, but out on the highway, you're going to start to feel it, especially as you own the bike for a long time and you go on longer rides and you get more accustomed to the bike, and you start to notice those things like a lack of power. So for that reason, with the engine and performance, a lot of people will graduate up out of the 883 into something like a Softail fairly quickly. Again, depending on the type of riding you're going to be doing. So maybe a year to 3 years, depending on your needs as far as your riding and where you're going to be going and everything. So I'm going to give this bike a 3 in the engine and the performance.
The 1200 has a fair bit more grunt than the 883, with something like 33% more displacement or something in that neighborhood. You're looking at a similar bump in power, and it's a noticeable bump. It's definitely something that you feel when you're riding the bike, and something that comes along with that bigger engine is slightly taller gearing on the 1200 bikes, which I'll get into later, but it's sometimes overlooked, and I think it's a really significant factor, but that does go along with the bigger engine. But it's just going to give you more passing power on the highway, a little bit more excitement on the roads. You're going to be able to pull away from traffic a little bit faster, and for $1,000, which is significantly less than if you tried to go to a 1200 kit yourself from an 883, you can get it from the factory in this bike right here.
So on this bike, as far as a handling and suspension standpoint, the suspension was upgraded in the 2016 model year, which made a big difference. They put the emulsion shocks on here, and that made a big difference. So this bike, in a straight line going down the highway, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's great. The Softails are significantly better, but these bikes do handle pretty well. So it's kind of like comfort-wise, the Sportster, especially at high speeds, isn't that great. But handling, going through the turns, going through the canes and things like that, the bike's actually not too bad. So for that reason, I would give this bike about a 5 in the handling and suspension category.
It handles really well. It's light on its feet. It's instills confidence when you're lane splitting if you find yourself lane splitting. It's a light bike, and usually I recommend it to anyone that's ridden dirt bikes and that's their transition to the sport world or the street world would be an Iron, either 883 or 1200, or any Sportster for that matter.
Handling. The two bikes have the same tire fitment, same suspension, same frame. The 883 and the 1200 handle pretty dang similarly. The only thing that's going to really contribute to feeling a little bit different is the handlebars. The two bikes do have very different handlebar positions. You have a lot more leverage on the Iron 1200, and it makes the front end feel a fair bit lighter, and the bike feels like it's transitioned side to side a bit better. It's also going to be a little bit more ergonomic for taller guys, so I'd highly recommend it for someone who's over 5'11" to definitely go with the Iron 1200, just because you're going to be more comfortable. But the handling in terms of the suspension performance, front and rear, is identical on the two bikes. Personally, I wish they had a little bit more ground clearance. I know why Harley did it in terms of going with really short shocks in the rear. I mean, they view these as kind of entry-level starter bikes, and it's kind of silly to make an entry-level starter bike really tall, but it does limit the amount of ground clearance the bikes have side to side. Luckily, and I'll get to this when we talk about customization, it's a really easy thing to fix. These bikes have relatively stiff suspension because of their short travel, so once you get more comfortable on the bike, you can gain a lot by just going to a shock that's custom sprung for your weight, and also gets you maybe another inch of height, which is a really cool upgrade that you can go with on Sporties. There's tons of manufacturers that make them, and there's tons of companies that'll even make you custom shocks for them. But in terms of handling, they handle really similarly. Really nice balanced chassis. They feel really light side to side. Just a lot of fun. My only real gripe is that you start dragging peg way before. I personally like to drag peg. It's not really egregious. I'm just a more experienced rider. I mean, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a great rider, but on a lightweight, fun chassis like this, I'm always excited to lean it over, and I end up dragging more than I would like. But it's an easy fix, like I said, and not only that, it would also improve ride comfort, so it's a 2-for-1 bird for me. I'd just swap the rear shocks really pretty quickly if I purchased this for myself.
Now moving on to the braking. The brakes on the Irons were upgraded in the 2015 model year, and that was a significant upgrade actually. The brakes were significantly improved in the 2015 model year. They went to a bigger, beefier caliper, and they reduced the brake effort as well. And so the brakes for the weight on this bike, I feel like are very good and in line with what you need. The braking capacity is very good for the weight of the vehicle. So for braking, I would rate this bike at about a 7.
I don't really have that much to say about these brakes, and that's really kind of a compliment. They work well. They stop the bike more than adequately. The feel and the progressivity through the lever in terms of how strong they bite is directly proportional to how hard you tug on the lever. There's not really much of a dead zone like I've found on some bikes. It's pretty immediate and pretty progressive. Utility is not great on these bikes. From the factory at least, they're pretty much city urban bikes, and that's because they really are just a bike. They're almost a bobber. There's nothing on here other than tank, wheels, and an engine. That's all you need, but it's nothing more than you need. So if you're doing anything more than just kind of short trips, you'd probably want to make some modifications to the bike.
Number 4 is going to be utility on these bikes. So the Sportsters, most people buy them to bop around town. Sure, there's a lot of accessories for these bikes, but as far as utility, like your lighting, the stock light on this is not very good. You've got a single halogen bulb light on this. Sure, you can buy the LED lights for this, but from the factory, single halogen light. If you're out on a really dark road, it's not going to be the best for you. As far as seating, you've got solo seats on these bikes, so you don't have the capability of putting a 2-up or riding 2-up and putting a passenger on the back right from the factory. That being said, you do have the option to buy additional passenger pillions on these bikes, no problem. Most anything is available for the Sportsters, by the way. You can get windshields as well, but because it doesn't come with that stuff, my rating system reflects that. The bike doesn't come with a windshield, like I said. You do have a little fairing on the Iron 1200. The little fairing on the front of the Iron 1200, I think, is more for cosmetics than anything. It gives you very little functionality in the way of wind deflection. Although it does deflect a little bit of wind off of your chest, I wouldn't really count on it to increase the level of comfort out on the highway for you. As far as other things utility-wise, with bags are available for this bike. Again, that's another thing that you have to purchase. So the bike, the way it sits from the factory in utility, I would probably give the bike about a 3. Again, you don't really buy this bike for long trips or for a bike that's really going to lend a lot of utility as far as wind deflection and storage and GPS and other things like that. The instrumentation is very limited on this bike, which I think actually lends to the style of the Sportster. People buy Sportsters because they're very raw, they're very simplistic. It's kind of one of these bikes where you chop off everything that you don't absolutely need and you kind of just strip the bike down to the bare bones and the essentials of the bike. All right, so let's jump into the touring capabilities on this bike. So this is going to rank very, very low in the touring capabilities. I don't think anyone's very surprised at that. You don't buy an Iron or any Sportster for that matter to tour across the country on. And I bring this up and I use this as part of the scoring system because Harley-Davidsons are among the best motorcycles in the market for touring. However, the Sportster is not one of these bikes. So for touring capabilities, I'm going to rate this bike, the Iron 883 at a 1. And the Iron 1200, I'm going to rate that bike at a 3. Mostly just there, again, because of the engine differences. The 1200 is more capable out on the open road than the 883. So, yeah, I rank the 883 at a 1 just because of all the Harley-Davidsons that are available on the market right now. That's the last bike that I would choose to go across the country on. So, now that being said, you do have some accessories that make these bikes more touring capable. Namely more comfortable seats, like I mentioned already, windshield. You have additional options as far as passenger backrests. You can do better lighting, which I feel like is an important thing to have when you're going across the state as well, or across the country as well. So there are accessories out there that you can buy and equip these bikes to make them more touring capable.
One thing to mention too that I forgot to touch on during utility or touring capabilities, it really affects both, is the size of the gas tank. In the world of Sportsters, this isn't the smallest, it's also not the biggest. 1200 Custom and 1200 Ts have bigger tanks. They've got a 4-gallon. This is a 3.3. It's shaped like a peanut tank, and so you get that kind of classic look for a sporty, but you don't have to deal with the 2.1 gallon tank. So it does give you a decent range. You're not going to be stopping every single day unless your commute is like 60 miles, each way or something. But it also doesn't really lend itself to long range riding if you're the kind of guy who could easily sit and do 200 miles before you have to stop. If you're someone who wants to take breaks every 100, 110 miles anyways, then probably one of these is going to be fine for you. But it is something to consider. That the long range of this bike is not only limited by comfort and lack of wind protection and lack of being able to store stuff, it's also limited a little bit by the fuel range. So that's another factor to consider.
So let's move on now to the style. As far as style goes on both these bikes, I do rate them pretty high. They've got a really good style, and I feel like the style is actually what makes these bikes sell so well. The style really has a universal appeal. It appeals to a lot of the younger generation and even a lot of the older generation. So it's kind of got Harley-Davidson's timeless appeal, which is again one of the qualities and one of the benefits of Harley-Davidson's is the style about the bikes are very timeless. And so for styling, I'm going to give these bikes an 8. And especially with the big kind of shift in styling that happened when the Nightster first came out. And I'm going to be releasing a video in the near future talking about the Nightster and how it really changed the entire playing field in the Sportster arena, and also kind of influenced other manufacturers in this same type of class of motorcycle. But yeah, the style I'm a big fan of. I really like the tank design that Harley-Davidson decided on with kind of like the AMF throwback tanks and paint. The Iron 883 has always kind of had a few changes here and there as far as the logos on the tank and everything. The eagle with the shield on it I think is really good, and this year they changed it again. It's always been real retro and kind of really in tune with the bobbers and kind of that era and that style of motorcycle. I'm a big fan of the blacked out nature. Most of you guys know that who've seen my bike before. I really like the blacked out cosmetics on the bikes as well, and they've really finished the look with the wheels and the exhaust and everything and the bars. So yeah, great style. It really appeals to a lot of the guys that buy these bikes, which is part of the reason why so many people buy them and part of the reason why they have such good resale as well.
Out of all the lineup, me personally, I like the Iron 1200 out of all of them. I personally like the gas tank, the paint on it, but kind of wish they would have went with a flat black feature like they did on the 883. A lot of people that like 883s love that they all come in flat black, and you have that option.
Let's jump into customization opportunities real quick. I touched on this quite a bit, but for customization opportunities, I'm going to give the Iron 883 and 1200 a 10 out of 10. This is the only bike that I would give a 10 to. There is no better Harley-Davidson on the market and available to purchase than a Sportster for purposes of customizing. And that is that way for a couple reasons. One, this platform, frame, chassis, and everything has been around for a very long time. So Harley-Davidson and all the aftermarket companies have had many years to develop and design parts that will fit this bike. So there's been very few changes to kind of throw off the availability and to change the fitment on parts. And they're very simple. So guys that like to get into the Harley world, and as part of getting into the Harley world, they also like to tinker and customize their bike. There's no better bike than the Iron and really the Sportster platform as a whole to tinker with and customize. So tons of Harley-Davidson, genuine Harley-Davidson parts to customize your bikes with, and tons of aftermarket parts for Sportsters as well. And there's a lot of niches that the Sportsters can kind of fall into with a few customization things like making it a scrambler, a dirt tracker, or a cafe racer bike. There's a lot of different niches that these Sportsters can be kind of transformed into with a few key component changes. So customization opportunities, 10 out of 10. Really, there's probably no other motorcycle in the entire world that can compete with a Sportster Harley-Davidson as far as being able to customize it.
Customization on these bikes is amazing, and it's really easy to make it into pretty much whatever you want. As I said before, you can swap the shocks out and make this thing an absolute canyon carver. There's kits from Harley that bump the power to some pretty stupid levels for a bike this size, and there's aftermarket companies that you can take it even beyond that. And there's windshields, there's bags, there's pretty much anything that has been done to a Sporty, or anything that you can imagine doing to a Sporty has already been done to a Sporty. And that also, not only does that make it fun to customize, but it also means that you can suit different roles with a Sportster.
The Sportsters, any Sportster you're looking at is basically a blank canvas. The people that buy Sportsters really trick them out. Sky's the limit on doing a Sportster to make it your way. From wheels to paint jobs to bars, anything you can think of. Seat, you can bob it out, track it out, brat it out, whatever you were thinking. Most likely it's been done to a Sportster.
Going on to the heart and soul of a Harley-Davidson, I'm going to give the Sportster a 10 out of 10 as well. Just the character of the Evolution Sportster, you can't beat it. It's quintessential Harley-Davidson. The sound, the feel. You throw a set of pipes on this thing, they sound amazing, and just everything about it, the construction, the components, everything is very much Harley-Davidson. It has Harley-Davidson's best of the best fit and finish as well. The paint is fantastic. You have Harley-Davidson's highest quality paint on here as well. So yeah, the Sportster definitely has the heart and soul of Harley-Davidson, and it's that heart and soul that so many people love about Harley-Davidson, which is why the old Evos and the old knuckle pan and shovel heads still sell very, very well, because they have that American engineering quality to them, and people love that. People love the sound and the feel of Harley-Davidsons, and this is a modern day Harley-Davidson where you can still get that old school feeling out of the bike. So yeah, kudos in that department for the heart and soul of Harley-Davidson.
Heart and soul of the bike, I'd say that this is a Harley through and through. Evo is probably the most iconic engine that Harley's ever really developed. Saved the company with the big twin, and to this day they're still making the sporty version of that. It's a really cool design in a lot of ways. Has the absolute Harley character that everyone knows and recognizes. People who aren't even into motorcycles can mimic the sound of a Harley back to you if you just ask them to, and the sound that they're going to mimic is going to be based upon them having heard this engine for decades.
So to move on to the matte factor, on this bike, kind of my final thoughts on this bike is it is an older chassis, it is an older engine, times are changing, expectations, especially with the up and coming generation, well, not all of them, but some of them just the expectations are changing as far as what they expect in a motorcycle, especially with the cooling and everything. These bikes do run pretty dang good. The engine is very resilient even in high heat, but the manufacturer on these bikes, I'm going to give it a 7 overall on these motorcycles. And again, a lot of that's my opinion. And this isn't a bike that at this stage in my riding career that I would purchase personally, but I think this is a fantastic bike for a lot of people. People that are just getting into the world of Harley-Davidson and want to get in at around the $10,000 range. Excellent bike, especially since it holds its value extremely well. There's a lot of motorcycles out there on the market, including Japanese and other manufacturers that you can buy for $10,000 that will not hold their value nearly as well as a Sportster Harley-Davidson. And so it's kind of that timeless bike that you can buy, enjoy, cut your teeth on maybe some customization opportunities, and really just ride it and get the full Harley-Davidson experience from. And then when your abilities and your needs to go to a bigger bike get to that point, you can sell it, has a great resale value, and you can move into something bigger like a Sportster or a Softail or something like that.